Hello, my wonderful friends, and welcome back to Frankie Stories, the podcast where we uncover fascinating tales hidden in plain sight. I'm Frankie, and today I want to take you somewhere you probably never expected to find in South Florida. Imagine this. You step out of your car. It's 90 degrees, probably 98. The Florida humidity instantly reminds you that your hair no longer belongs to you. A palm tree swaying in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, an abyss is judging your life decisions. It's another perfectly ordinary day in South Florida. Until you walk through a wooden gate and suddenly everything changes. The noise fades away. Gravel crunches softly beneath your feet. Giant koi fish glide through crystal clear ponds. Bamboo rustles overhead. You cross a bridge that could have been lifted straight from Kyoto. Wait, am I still in Florida? Welcome to the Morikami Museum and Japanese Gardens. A hidden gem in Delray Beach, here in South Florida. One of Florida's most extraordinary hidden treasures. And today I'm going to tell you the incredible story behind it. Because this isn't just the story of a beautiful museum. It's the story of dreams, immigration, failure, perseverance, and one farmer who quietly changed Florida forever. At first glance, it feels almost magical. It's easy to imagine that someone simply decided to build a beautiful Japanese garden in Florida because it would look nice. However, the real story is much more remarkable. The Morikami Museum exists because more than a century ago, a group of brave Japanese immigrants crossed the Pacific Ocean with an extraordinary dream. They believed they could build a farming community in one of the wildest parts of the United States. They hoped to preserve their culture, create prosperous farms, and establish a new life thousands of miles from home. Their story is filled with optimism, disappointment, determination, and remarkable generosity. It's also a story that almost disappeared from history. Today I want to take you back to the beginning. To understand why these pioneers came to Florida, we first need to travel to Japan during one of the most dramatic periods in its history. For more than 2 centuries, Japan had remained largely isolated from the rest of the world. During the Edo period, foreign trade was tightly controlled and Japanese society changed very slowly. Families often lived in the same villages for generations, traditions were deeply respected, and life followed patterns that had existed for hundreds of years. Then, in 1868, everything changed. The period known as the Meiji Restoration transformed Japan with astonishing speed. Railroads were built, factories appeared, modern schools were established, and the country embraced technology from Europe and the United States. The samurai class lost its traditional privileges, and young people suddenly found themselves living in a nation that looked completely different from the one in which their parents had grown up. Although this modernization brought tremendous opportunities, it also created uncertainty. Many young men wondered whether they could build a better future somewhere else. At the same time, the United States was actively encouraging immigration and agricultural development, promising inexpensive land and the chance to own a successful farm. For adventurous people with courage and ambition, America represented possibility. One of those dreamers was a man named Joe Sakai. Sakai was more than an immigrant looking for a fresh start. He envisioned creating an entire Japanese agricultural community where families could live together, preserve their traditions, and demonstrate that Japanese farmers could succeed in America. When he learned about inexpensive farmland in South Florida, the opportunity seemed almost too good to be true. The region offered sunshine throughout the year, fertile soil in many areas, and enough land for an entire settlement. Of course, reading about Florida on paper and actually living here are two different experiences, as anyone who has spent a summer in South Florida can confirm. When the first settlers reached what would become the Yamato colony in 1904, they didn't find neat fields waiting to be planted. They found pine forests, thick palmetto scrub, sandy soil, and endless stretches of wilderness. Today, if you drive through Boca Raton or Delray Beach, you'll pass elegant homes, shopping centers, and beautifully landscaped streets. It's difficult to imagine that only a little over a century ago, this landscape was considered the frontier. There were no supermarkets, there was no electricity, there was no air conditioning, there were very few roads. The settlers had to build almost everything themselves. Before they could plant a single pineapple, they had to clear the land. That meant cutting down pine trees by hand, removing stubborn roots, and burning brush under the hot Florida sun. It was exhausting work, and it often took weeks to prepare even a small piece of land. Many of these immigrants had farming experience in Japan, but Florida presented an entirely different set of challenges. The soil behaved differently, the weather behaved differently, even the insects behaved differently. Imagine spending your first evening in your new home after months of travel. You finally sit down to enjoy the sunset, only to discover that the local mosquito population had apparently organized a welcoming committee. Anyone who has lived in South Florida knows that mosquitoes are persistent today. Now imagine them before modern drainage system, insect repellents, and screened windows. One visitor to early Florida joked that the mosquitoes seemed large enough to file property taxes. That may have been an exaggeration, but perhaps not by much. The settlers quickly learned another important lesson about Florida. The weather is perfectly capable of changing its mind. A beautiful sunny morning could become a violent thunderstorm by the afternoon. During hurricane season, dark clouds rolling in from the Atlantic demanded immediate action. Crops that had taken months to grow could be damaged or destroyed in a single day. For pineapple farmers, that uncertainty was especially frustrating. At the beginning of the 20th century, pineapples looked like an excellent investment. Florida's warm climate seemed ideal. The fruit was becoming increasingly popular across the United States. The colony's founders believed that they had discovered an opportunity that would allow the community to prosper for generations. Unfortunately, farming has a habit of reminding people that nature always has the final vote. Pineapple plants are surprisingly sensitive. they disliked unexpected cold weather, standing water, and certain diseases. Every season presented a new challenge. Even when the harvest was successful, another problem remained. How do you get thousands of pineapples to market before they spoil? Today, refrigerated trucks can move fresh products across the country in a matter of days. In 1904, transportation was far more complicated. The settlers depended on railroads and shipping companies. Timing mattered, prices fluctuated, competition increased. Soon growers from Cuba and other tropical regions were producing pineapples more cheaply than Florida farmers could imagine. It was becoming clear that hard work alone would not guarantee success. Yet, what fascinates me most about the Yamato colony is not the struggle to grow crops. It is the determination to build a community. The settlers were not simply neighbors living near one another. They celebrated holidays together. They helped one another clear land. They shared equipment. When someone became ill, others stepped in to work the fields. When a new family arrived, everyone pitched in to help them settle. In many ways, the colony functioned like an extended family. That sense of cooperation reflected an important Japanese value. The word wa means harmony. The harmony was essential if the colony was going to survive. Life followed a rhythm that evolved around the seasons. People rose before sunrise because the coolest hours of the day were also the most productive. Breakfast was simple but filling. Then everyone headed into the fields. The work continued until the heat became almost unbearable. If you've ever complained about walking from the parking lot into Publix during an August afternoon, imagine doing manual labor for 10 hours without air conditioning. Suddenly groceries shopping doesn't seem quite so difficult, right? The settlers adapted as best that they could. One detail I especially enjoy is that several colonists wrote home describing Florida's incredible abundance of plants, birds, and flowers. They had experienced hardship, but they were also amazed by the beauty surrounding them. Even after difficult days in the fields, they could watch spectacular sunsets over the flat landscape or listen to unfamiliar birds calling through the pine forests. Those moments reminded them why they had come, to build something better. Although the colony never became the prosperous agricultural community its founders had imagined, it succeeded in another important way. It proved that people from opposite sides of the world could work together, learn from one another, and leave a lasting mark on the place they called home. Sometimes we measure success by money, sometimes by the size of a harvest, but perhaps the better measure is whether people leave behind a story worth telling. The pioneers of Yamato certainly did. By the 1920s, many of the colony's original dreams had begun to fade. One by one, families sold their farms and moved elsewhere in search for better opportunities. The Yamato colony never officially disappeared. Instead, it slowly dissolved as people made practical decisions for their families. Some moved to larger cities, some returned to Japan, and others simply started new lives in different parts of America. One man, however, chose a different path. His name was George Morikami. George arrived in Florida in 1906, only 2 years after the colony had been established. Like many of the other settlers, he came hoping to build a better future through farming. Unlike most of them, he never left. As the years passed and his neighbors moved away, George quietly continued cultivating vegetables and other crops on his land near Delray Beach. He lived a simple life, working from sunrise until sunset, rarely seeking attention and never becoming wealthy. Eventually, he became the last surviving member of the Yamato colony, still farming the land. Then came the darkest chapter in the story. On December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Almost overnight, Japanese Americans found themselves viewed with fear and suspicion. On the West Coast, more than 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry were forced into internment camps. Families lost their homes, businesses, and farms simply because of their heritage. It is sad to watch the history repeat itself over and over again, right, Chuck? Florida's Japanese community was much smaller, and there were no large internment camps here like those in California, Arizona, or Wyoming. Even so, the attack changed everything. The few remaining Japanese families in South Florida lived under suspicion. Some community leaders were questioned by federal authorities. Property owned by Japanese nationals was closely monitored, and many people felt pressure to distance themselves from their Japanese identity. By then, most of the Yamato colony had already disappeared. World War II marked the end of any realistic hope that it could ever be rebuilt. The land of the Yamato colony was taken by the US government during World War II through eminent domain, and the remaining families were forced to leave so the government could build the Boca Raton Army Airfield, which became the Army's primary radar training center. George Morikami, however, stayed in Florida. He continued farming through the war and for decades afterward. Those who knew him described him as humble, hardworking, and deeply devoted to the land. He never married, had no kids, and lived modestly in a small house surrounded by his fields. As South Florida changed around him, George watched roads replace dirt trails and the neighborhoods replace farmlands. The quiet wilderness he had first encountered slowly became one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. The land he had farmed for decades became increasingly valuable. Today, it would have been easy to sell that property to developers for a substantial fortune. Instead, George made an extraordinary decision. In 1973, he donated approximately 200 acres of his farmland to Palm Beach County. He had one simple request. He wanted the land to be used to preserve Japanese culture and to honor the memory of the Yamato pioneers who had worked so hard to build a community there. That gift eventually became the Morikami Museum and Japanese Gardens. The museum first opened in 1977 in a small building nearby. As interest grew, a larger museum and the beautiful Japanese gardens were developed on George-donated land, creating the peaceful destination that thousands of visitors enjoy today. George Morikami lived long enough to see his dream begin to take shape. He passed away in 1976 at the age of 91, just before the museum officially opened. Although he never became the successful pineapple farmer he had once hoped to be, he achieved something far more enduring. He ensured that the story of the Yamato colony would not disappear. Today, every visitor who walks through the gardens, feeds the koi fish, or participates in a tea ceremony is experiencing the legacy of one quiet farmer who believed that history should be remembered. Sometimes the greatest legacy is not the wealth we accumulate, but the stories we choose to preserve. George Morikami understood that better than most. If you've never been to the Morikami Museum and Japanese Gardens, I encourage you to visit it. Let me paint a picture. You leave the busy streets of Delray Beach behind and turn into a quiet entrance lined with tropical trees. Within minutes, the sounds of traffic begin to fade. Instead, you hear birds, rustling bamboo, and the gentle splash of water. It doesn't feel like an amusement park attraction or a movie set. It feels authentic. This is exactly what the museum's designers wanted. As you continue your walk through Morikami, you'll notice that the gardens aren't just beautiful, they're telling a story. The 6 gardens of Rojin take you on a journey through more than 1,000 years of Japanese history. It begins with the graceful Shinden Garden, inspired by the elegant estates of Japan's imperial court, where nobles admired the scenery from boats and palace verandas. From there, you enter the peaceful Paradise Garden, created to reflect the Buddhist vision of heaven. The landscape then becomes simpler and more contemplative with the early Rock Garden and the famous Zen Garden, where carefully placed stones and raked gravel symbolize mountains, rivers, and islands, inviting quiet meditation. As you move into the flat garden of the Edo period, you'll discover winding paths, stone lanterns, and beautifully framed views that celebrate harmony between people and nature. Finally, the modern romantic garden brings Japanese garden design into the 20th century, blending traditional ideas with lush tropical plants, waterfalls, and a more natural style. Walking through Morikami isn't just a stroll through a garden, it's a walk through centuries of Japanese culture and philosophy, all without even leaving South Florida. Nothing is placed by accident. In Japanese garden design, even empty space has meaning. A stone may represent a mountain. A pond may symbolize the sea. A bridge often represents a journey from one stage of life to another. The goal is not to impress visitors with extravagance, but to create harmony between nature and people. As someone who lives in South Florida, I find that idea especially refreshing. We're surrounded by places that constantly ask us to hurry. Hurry to work, hurry through traffic, hurry to answer emails, hurry to the next appointment. The Morikami Museum asks us to do the opposite. Slow down, listen, observe. At the Morikami Museum and Japanese Gardens, the experience goes far beyond a traditional museum exhibition. It feels more like stepping into a living cultural place that's constantly changing with the seasons. Throughout the year, Morikami comes alive with cultural events and hands-on experiences that bring Japanese traditions directly to visitors. Many visitors are surprised to discover that the museum itself contains much more than gardens. Inside, you'll find exhibitions about Japanese history, art, festivals, samurai culture, traditional clothing, calligraphy, ceramics, and the story of the Yamato colony. One of the exhibits that many people find especially moving tells the story of George Morikami and the early settlers who came to Florida with dreams of building new life. That exhibition always leaves me in tears. That's something I can't help when I see all these old pictures and items of their household, and it's just so moving and so touching to see that dedication by the people who came from another part of the world without knowing where they were going, where everything was different, everything. And it's even nowadays with all the modern technology where we can use ChatGPT and Google everything that we need, it still would be a struggle to move to another country and start from nowhere, right? From zero, from scratch. But back in the day, people moved just by seeing one picture and having no idea. And everything is different. Nature is different, even the air is different. The food is different, vegetables are different, insects are different, animals are different, people look different, people dress differently. It's mind-blowing how much is there. Photographs show ordinary people standing proudly beside their farms, simple tools, wooden houses, families smiling from the camera. Looking at those images, it's easy to forget how difficult their lives really were. History often remembers spectacular victories. Right now, there is an exhibition that opens a door into something a little stranger than the peaceful landscapes outside. It's, I would say it's definitely a special treat for the visitors from the Morikami Museum. So right now there is an exhibition that explores the world of yokai. Yokai is the supernatural creatures of Japanese folklore. These are not just ghosts or monsters in the Western sense, but spirits, shapeshifters, or mysterious forces that once explained the unexplainable. Strange noises in the night, sudden illnesses, bad luck, or even the feeling that something unseen is watching. For centuries, yokai have lived in Japanese art and storytelling, appearing in everything from ancient scrolls to dramatic woodblock prints. Some are terrifying, some are playful, and some are almost absurd. But all of them reflect the human need to give form to fear, wonder, and imagination. In this exhibition, those stories come alive through striking historical images and traditional artwork, letting visitors step into a world where the line between reality and myth is very thin. Chuck, you know I love such things. It's not just an exhibit, it feels like walking through the shadowed corners of Japanese imagination, right here in South Florida. I had a chance to see this exhibition already twice, since it opened, I think in May. And I was able to explore only, I don't know, maybe one-tenth of the whole exhibition. And I was taking pictures, and because there were tons of beautiful wood blocks, the art with yokai images, these ghost images, and they all come with the stories and behind them. It's fascinating. And there are always new exhibitions that are coming to museum and different festivals. For example, in the summer there is Tanabata, the Star Festival, where people write wishes on colorful strips of paper and tie them to bamboo. Seasonal celebrations like Obon honor ancestors with lanterns and reflection, while workshops invite guests to try everything from traditional tea ceremonies and calligraphy to taiko, drumming, origami, kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, you probably heard about it, and even kokedama, the creation of living moss plant sculptures. Throughout it all, Morikami becomes more than a museum. It transforms into a bridge between cultures, where ancient traditions, seasonal festivals, and living art forms continue to evolve. Right here in South Florida, we're so lucky. And perhaps that's George Morikami's greatest gift. He didn't simply donate land. he created a place where cultures could meet. A place where a child from Florida can learn about Japanese traditions. A place where Japanese Americans can celebrate their heritage. A place where visitors from around the world can discover that different cultures often share the same values: respect for family, appreciation for nature, hard work, kindness, and hope. Whenever I visit the gardens, I think about the original settlers. I imagine them standing in the Florida heat over a century ago, wondering whether their sacrifices would amount to anything. Could they have imagined that more than 100 years later, thousands of people would walk through gardens built in their memory? I doubt it. Their farms disappeared, their colony faded away, but their story survived. Sometimes history works in unexpected ways, right, Chuck? The thing, yeah. Koi, yes. Enormous fish, yes, and so beautiful, white and orange, so huge, and they're right there. I love koi fish too, and I also the museum also has a beautiful gift shop that I always treat myself with, and they have beautiful pottery with the images of traditional images of koi, yeah, and cranes, of course, traditional Japanese images, but it's amazing. I agree with you, Chuck. That and so yes, the nature there is so beautiful, and the birds, and it just takes you on a different kind of a trip, where you walk through the garden, but you go within, and it's a great way to meditate. The things we build with bricks eventually crumble. The businesses we create may close. Even entire communities can disappear. Yet generosity, courage, and compassion have a remarkable ability to outlive all of us. George Morikami understood that instead of asking, "What can I leave for myself?" he asked, "What can I leave for future generations?" That is a question worth asking in every lifetime. If you ever find yourself in South Florida, I encourage you to visit the Morikami Museum. Walk slowly, watch the koi fish, sit beside one of the ponds for a few minutes without looking at your phone. You may discover that the most valuable thing George Morikami donated wasn't 200 acres of land. It was an opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to remember people whose quiet lives changed the history of this corner of Florida forever. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for letting me share something. It's one of my safe spaces that I have a membership and that I visit a lot to reflect on life and to slow down in this high-paced life that's always go, 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 go. No. Step for a second, enjoy the bamboo, the koi, the culture. That's beautiful. We're so lucky to have this wonderful place. Thank you so much, Chuck. I really appreciate the opportunity that you give me every month to share these things that are so special for me. People who know me in person know that I would chat about all those things, but here you give me the platform to share it with more people than a group of my friends. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for being here with me on the New American Dream Radio Show. This is the end of the show, and I hope to see you all back next week and every week, right here. Good night.
Oh, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Frankie's Stories. I encourage you to visit the Morikami Museum if you live here in South Florida. Trust me, you won't regret it. Or hit me up if you want to take a walk with me.